after the Second World War, unique colour film has been discovered in archives around the world. With the personal letters and diaries of ordinary British people, it provides a new look at the conflicts that shaped our century. Now, the diarists, amateur filmmakers, and those captured on film reflect and remember.
The nightmares were coming, and I was in the water again, kicking myself clear, coming up in the sea, red with blood.
Such a horrifying thing from beginning to end. We didn't want a war. People had no idea what it would mean.
It turns men who could be civilized, decent people into beasts. It is necessary for people to become beasts in order to fight a war.
This is no war of chieftains or of princes, of dynasties or national ambitions. This is a war of the unknown warrior.
Just moments after the announcement of war, sirens began to sound across London. Gwyneth Thomas was working at Highgate Hospital. When war broke out, she decided to keep a diary. Every evening, she would sit down to describe the events of the day.
Then the warning came. One of the consultants had come up to my ward with gas masks and tell me to make every patient put them on. The patients couldn't breathe, and now they were terrified, all crying and pleading not to put them on. Well, I didn't make them put them on. We were given the option that we should get out of London as soon as the war broke out. I don't think any more than 2 nurses went home. No, we stay here and help.
Hugh Bone, from Upminster in Essex, had been a pacifist before the war. But in October 1939, he decided to volunteer.
I felt it was right. I felt we had to do it. I was doing the right thing, the only thing I could do. Because I was the sort of person I am, I could not stand aside. It might be wicked, it might be awful, but I couldn't stand aside and pretend that I was any different or better or anything else. I got to be in. When you're trained to use a bayonet, you're trained to shout and swear and rush at the thing and put all you've got into shoving your bayonet through this sack. Thrust it forward, pull it out, stamp on the body on the ground. You're taught to go mad. You only fight if you're mad. If you're off your head and angry and shouting and doing things you wouldn't normally do, you have to become a beast.
Coal miner's son, Ken Oakley, was 18 when he joined up in January 1940.
Some of the things that we were asked to do were crazy, no doubt about that, but the end thing was that we couldn't allow Hitler to carry on as he had. Otherwise, we would all be under the thumb.
If you're faced with a fight, what can you do? If I was faced with a man who was attacking my wife or my children, and I had a gun in my hands, I would shoot them. I would have no hesitation.
Before the war, Malcolm and Jenny Sisson had worked for the Provincial Insurance Company in Kendal, Cumbria.
We couldn't afford to get married with the wages we were getting in the insurance company. We were sort of trying to save up, and then the war came, and you earned more than you were.
Oh, I did, really. Although that wasn't a lot either, but just enough then.
When Malcolm joined the RAF, they were able to get married at St. Peter's Church, Heversham. Jenny's great-aunt Mabel filmed it in colour.
Oh, no, then, isn't that nice? In this film again, after nearly 60 years.
Roses. And there's your dad.
Yes, our little bridesmaids now.
And there's Jim.
Oh, yes. That's a nice shot of us too, isn't it?
Jean, you can hardly believe she's as grand now.
No. It's not a job you had to get flowers. Things are very scarce in wartime. Everything was rationed almost.
I made my own wedding dress. My mother helped. She did all the little button holes on the sleeves. And then afterwards, I loaned it to two friends. And they both were married in the same dress.
Here we are, ready for going away on that honeymoon. My teeth show well, don't they?
Well, we look very happy.
Oh, yes. We're still
just as much in love
as ever.
When we first met. After all these years.
Mary Bloomfield was living in Graysford Avenue, Coventry. She wrote in her diary almost every day. On the 8th of June, 1940, she set down her fears of a German invasion.
News has been coming in of parachutists dressed as clergymen landing in Norway. Women are particularly afraid, as we hear that if you're young and healthy, you might be sent to Germany to a baby farm to be mated to Germans.
We've all decided we ought to have a pile of hand grenades in the bedroom near the window in case the Germans and their tanks come up our street. I was just 25, and you wondered what you'd do if these soldiers suddenly came. But we were frightened of them, or what would happen. And what you do to defend yourself in your home. So I thought that out. I thought the direct approach wouldn't get you anywhere. So you'd have to put a false face on and pretend to be sociable. And that's what I thought I'd do. I'd say, you poor boy, you look very tired. Come and sit down, I'll make you a nice cup of tea. And then I would put something in it to say, and go to sleep, and you wouldn't wake up. But of course, I had not faced the fact. Other Germans would arrive to look for him, and they want to know how he died. And then, of course, I don't know what my fate would have been. I don't know what would have happened. I haven't got any poison, by the way. I think I got some stuff we put in the water softener or something.
When the homeland is in danger and there's trouble in the air, we forget our little squabbles and it's trespassers beware. All the nation.
In the summer of 1940, 17-year-old choir boy Norris Liedl joined the Lincolnshire Home Guard.
We must all stick together.
His platoon was filmed in colour by local amateur cameraman Vernon Clark.
We must all stick together.
That's my squad. There I am. 3 down from the front.
Whatever may befall, the richest in the land, the poorest of us all.
I was 17 and they was asking for recruits, and I thought, well, why not? And I think it was only true to your country to
doing a bit. This was the practice of the grenade throwing. The first hand grenade I got in my hand, I was terrified. It was very scary to think that you'd got that in your hand and it could go off any time. Because only a few weeks before the chap was in the dugout, he dropped it and they'd no time to run out, blew into pieces. If the Germans did get across, you wonder what happened. I don't think we should have done much good.
For families separated by war, radio broadcasts, especially Churchill's speeches and the nightly news, lifted morale.
At 9 o'clock every night, the chimes of Big Ben preceded the 9 o'clock news, and we too thought of each other at 9 o'clock. While that was happening,
Yes.
it was our special sort of time to...
Well, we were linked in spirit then.
Yes.
And then Churchill, we all had faith in Churchill, didn't we?
He was
linked in Churchill.
Yes.
And now it has come to us.
He was the right man in the right place at the right time.
And face the worst that the tyrant's might and enmity can do.
We felt as he would bring us through somehow.
Bearing ourselves humbly before God.
Our Churchill, we worshipped him.
An unfolding purpose.
There was no man anywhere as big as Churchill. And he'd had a rough time getting to where he got. She used to come over on the radio and encourage us.
We shall fight on the beaches.
We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the air. We will not be defeated.
We shall never surrender.
And, he was wonderful.
Throughout the summer, Nurse Gwyneth Thomas watched as the fighter pilots of the RAF fought in the skies above.
We just stood there and certainly did not believe that they would drop on us. We couldn't believe it would happen. And I watched our boys in the sky, and the Germans came through, and they were fighting. It was just as though you were watching a football match. And we were saying, that's right, boys, go on, blow them up. And then we were likely to be dead the next minute.
The Battle of Britain was won, but Hitler's bombers began to wreak havoc on British cities.
I was absolutely petrified. I shook from head to foot. And we thought, well, best thing to do, I thought, I'll get under my bed. And then I looked up and saw springs. I thought, oh no, I'm not having those through me. So I went back onto the bank in the corridor.
At the end of every raid, Gwyneth would return to her diary.
26th of September. Thank God we're still here. Nearer and nearer they seem to come each night.
Three firemen were badly hit. Two were stationed at this hospital up to a month ago. Bill, as everyone knows him, he was one. Gives you a cold feeling inside when someone you know has been hit. Now we are beginning to see the results of Hitler's madness.
My diary was always in my bedroom. I'd come off duty, get to my bedroom, and I'd write what I had been through. Writing is my therapy. If ever I get distressed about anything, I put it on paper. But when people say, well, you're frightened, we were in a peculiar state of shock. You just did things automatically. You got so used to it. And wherever you went, you would go down a street that you knew was just rows of houses and there was nothing there. I saw a whole street go. I mean, most of the people were killed. I just happened to look out of the window when that particular bomb dropped. I mean, the only thing I ever hoped for at any time was that I wouldn't be buried alive. I don't know how we did it. Don't ask me how we went through it. I don't know.
It was a beautiful poem. I doubt if you'll find an ex-Spitfire pilot anywhere in the world. At the very mention of the name, his eyes will not take on a glazed look, and he'll go back into dreamland. It was a lovely aircraft to fly. After the Battle of Britain, I would say every teenager in the United Kingdom wanted to be a Spitfire pilot. Every single teenager, bar none.
As soon as he was 17, Keith Lee from Liverpool rushed to join the RAF.
I went and presented myself to the flight sergeant. He didn't exactly look at me like I was God's gift to the RAF, but he did send me for a medical and a selection board.
For his training, Keith was sent to the United States of America.
Mopping up soda pop Ricky to our heart's delight. That's to swing through quickie, jukebox Saturday night.
Oh, there's me sitting in the deck chair, as ever, very self-conscious. And you can see us larking about in the garden.
Keith and his fellow RAF pilots spent their weekends with a surrogate family, Mr. and Mrs. Hall from Tulsa, Oklahoma. They filmed the British boys in color.
It was another world opening up. After war-torn England, with rationing and blackouts, I mean, there was a great big world opening up for us. We were given almost daily lectures on decorum and behaviour. Things like, say, whistling at young ladies, that was a capital offence. You sort of didn't do that at all. Oh dear. On the right hand, there's me, and keep trying to duck out of the way. I don't think I had the stuff that film stars were made of.
As a 16-year-old, Dawn Gould was swept away by the good looks and glamour of the GIs who flooded into Britain. Every day, she would settle down to write in her diary.
Went to the Bellevue last night. Hawks and Freeman's is now being made into a club for Yanks. Cool. Harry Berman brought me some records. Glenn Miller in the Mood, Harry James, You Made Me Love You, and the Woodchopper's Ball.
Woodchopper's Ball. We did a good conga and jitterbug. Oh, Mama, Snake Hips.
Snake Hips was a Latin American sailor. Oh, he was the most wonderful dancer. When you got a good partner, everybody in the ballroom would come and stand around you in a big circle, and you'd get more and more frenzied. It would be wonderful. And where I was such a tall girl, I often used to have my partner jump up into my arms instead of me into his. I used to do it the other way round. And I always carried them off the floor afterwards and deposited them on a chair.
He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was a top.
Well, of course, not counting the accent, which we all knew from the films, I think it was their manners. They were so polite. They called everybody ma'am, and they say, excuse me, ma'am, and pardon me, ma'am, and the things that we weren't used to. The English boys had very, very rough cloth, and sometimes it was impregnated with anti-gas material, and it smelled awful sulphury. And with the Americans, they had this very good quality cloth, and you could feel the difference. And they had the advantage of the aftershave lotion, lovely white teeth, beautiful uniforms, and of course our boys then did get a bit jealous, but you can understand it why.
A little bit of animosity. They had a lot more money than we had. Our wages weren't very high, and they weren't frightened about flashing it, to entice, which, was used to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable.
We never came much into contact with the American families, forces, did we?
No.
But yes, I think there would be a tendency to ease moral standards at that time.
I think it was definitely the American mentality. You're either cheap and easy, or you're the girl next door, or the girl his sister goes to school with, They just got that mentality that there's good girls and bad girls, which is really pretty good. Of course, it won't be like it now. They're all at it, aren't they?
Well, you tended to wait till you were married to have full intimacy, didn't you? Yeah. We did.
Yes.
In July 1943, 22-year-old able seaman Ken Oakley wrote of his experience during the invasion of Sicily.
Reading through it, I wondered how the heck I coped with it, a lot of the things that are written there. And I was just a boy from a village, and I joined the Navy and learned how to cope with all that, and managed to get through it. At last the order came. Lower boats! We were away. With half many machine guns passing over them. Tat-tat-tat, our brain guns began to speak. Then
crunch down the door, and we were there. A sapper began to cry, plead, and cling to the floorboards, swearing he couldn't move. We left him. His nerve was gone. The shrill whine of bullets speeded us on. Then it came.
That was bang. And then I was in the water, dragged down. Someone clutching my feet, trying to hold on to me, but I couldn't get up. I finally kicked myself clear rose to the surface amid a sea full of blood, arms, legs, men's insides. I'll never ever eat tripe again, because that is what a man's flesh is like when he's blown out of it. And I finally, after a lot of struggling, got to the beach where I collapsed. I came to, hearing a voice, "Oh my God, help me, save me. Oh my God, help me, save me." I looked and went to the gangplank. And on the gangplank was the captain, Padre, who I'd been speaking to on the landing craft. His legs were gone, and he was crying out for help. His God sent me along, and I carried him down the gangplank, where I collapsed on the beach. And then I left him for medical aid. Carried on to do my job. A few days later, it came back to me what had happened on the beach. And the nightmares were coming, and I was in the water again, kicking myself clear, coming up in the sea, red with blood. During the day, I could cast it out of my mind with things to do. But at night, when I put my head down to sleep, then it would come back to me. Later, I was able to purchase a notebook, and in the notebook I wrote it out, a full account of what had happened. And then my head settled, and I was able to temporarily forget all the traumatic things that had happened on the beach in Sicily.
In May 1943, Harry Porter of the 8th Heavy Anti-Aircraft Belfast Regiment arrived in India.
We were 6 weeks on board ship, and we got off the ship in Bombay and were allowed a couple of days leave, and I was working up one of the main shopping centres, and there was a firm called Eastman Kodak, and I'd never heard of them. I looked in the window, just arrived from America, a nice little camera, about 8 inches by 4 inches, and a lot of coloured film, which I didn't even know existed.
Harry bought the camera and the colour film before he and his regiment embarked on the 1,500-mile drive to Burma.
Unfortunately, as soon as we got to the edge of the Burma border, an edict came out, no cameras allowed east of the Brahmaputra. But I said to myself, well, I've got my camera, I may as well keep it. So gradually I got enough courage to bring my camera out now and again, which I did. It was decreed that we should learn the art of self-defense and silent killing. And this is me taking a dagger off one of the boys. Our immediate program was the Japanese in front of us. We were amazed that when we blew the tops off their bunkers and dugouts, that they didn't surrender the way any sensible soldier might have done, but they committed harakiri. But we didn't have any great hatred for them. We were doing a job the way we were. The hatred came after the war when the stories came out. say our trouble in Burma was the 3 M's: morale, malaria, and the third one was the monsoon. We fought the monsoon as much as we could, but we quickly realized with our heavy equipment you couldn't move it during monsoon because everything turned to mud. Everything was damp. Clothes, food, the lot.
Near Banbridge town in the county down one morning last July.
In our 3.5 years in Burma, we only saw one concert party. We had to make up our own amusements, and these are the boys dressed up. Where they got the clothes from, I didn't ask any questions. It was childish looking at it now, but to us it was great fun. We laughed our heads off. And we hadn't seen a girl for, what, over 3 years. You can understand that any diversion was very welcome.
At the age of 26, novelist Moira MacLeod was with naval staff, planning the invasion of Europe. She kept a secret diary.
Sunday afternoon was still and breathless. Strict bans were in force. No conversations with civilians, no private telephone calls, and all naval personnel confined to their places of duty.
We knew that D-Day was coming, but nobody knew when. The sea was absolutely chock-a-block. Torbay was jammed with craft. You could almost walk from one to the other. It was the most exciting thing.
Just 3 weeks before D-Day, Dawn Gould had become engaged to a GI.
His name was Stewart. He was in the American 1st Division. He was so dark and handsome. I really was thrilled to bits. They'd been shut in their barracks for several days. Nobody was allowed out at all. So I went out there with someone in the jeep and saw him out there and said goodbye to him. Didn't get right close to him. I just waved to him and said goodbye through the barbed wire, you know.
Then it began to be rather pathetic because they kept giving me envelopes and saying, will you please post this? This is my family, you know, and what about, this is the money for the stamps. And it began to be very moving.
On HMS Glenerne, Lieutenant Hugh Bone was ready for his first action.
In a sense, we were expectant. We were looking forward. We boarded our ship, but there was a delay of 24 hours, so we stayed on shipboard. It was sunny, actually. I sat in a little boat moored by our boat and went to sleep part of the time. We all felt this is it. This is really it. It was excitement because your first action is exciting. My experience was not peculiar to me. It's only after you know what's involved that you begin to get frightened.
The Armada assembled in the Channel. For Hugh Bone and 1 million other men, the waiting would soon be over.
It was night. I think we were all excited. I didn't detect any sort of anything other than people feeling like me, really. I went to bed, slept.
On the embarkation ship Orontes, was Royal Navy Commando Ken Oakley. It was just a year since he'd survived the invasion of Sicily.
The senior army officer who gave us the pep talk the night before, he said, many of you will not survive the first assault wave. He said, some of you might survive the second. He said, but not to worry. We shall just pass over you until we have captured the beach. That is the thing that must be done. You must capture the beach.
Complete silence fell and an emptiness. It's very sort of still, very still. We'd done all we could. And then we stopped and listened, and we heard in the distance, boom, 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 the guns beginning to fire over in France.
The greatest sea-borne invasion in history had begun. D-Day. At 5:30 a.m., Allied warships began to bombard the coast of France.
We got into the boats. The padre said some prayers. You sat on a little piece of wood. There are 3 rows like this. You sat one behind the other, so you kept our heads down.
As we boarded the craft, we could hear the huge shells that were being fired by the battleships. The balls firing as they whizzed overhead. Shells weighing about a ton each.
In a letter to his mother, Hugh Bone described the horrors of the landings.
By now, we could hear the enemy machine guns, the explosions of enemy mortars on the beach. We clutched our weapons. Now was the moment.
Stuff was falling pretty close to us. People were hit. Some were dead, others struggling to crawl out of the water. We couldn't help them. Our job was to push on. There were some horrible sights. Men calling out for help. I wanted to pull a body out of the waves, but he looked to be dead. I had no time or duty there.
People were being hit. The boat next to us, when they opened the ramp, bullets went straight in. Our padre was wounded, our medical officer was killed. We'd been given strict instructions not to give any first aid or help, because our job was to get across the beach and onto our target, leaving the beach for others coming after us to come in.
It was very, very bad when we landed. When you hear bullets whizzing through the air, you think, well, I've got to get under some cover. I've got to do something about this. I've got to find out where it's coming from. Can I attack? Can I reach them with the gun I have?
I realized that we were being shelled and I couldn't get away from it. I was suddenly afraid.
The scene was one of devastation, bodies everywhere. Around you, people crying out for help.
You cope with it by saying, well, nevertheless, I must carry on, but you become a little more frightened every time something lands near you. The provost sergeant was wounded just by me. He'd been hit in the shoulder and he was very pale. He talked about a letter to his brother and so on. But I put my arms around him and put my field dressing on him and, you know, looked after him as you do. You learn then to do things that I wouldn't have learned perhaps other ways. It would take me a long time to put my arm around anybody, but you just do.
I was working on the water's edge, and I heard the sound of pipes. I couldn't believe it until I looked to my right and saw the piper marching along with his kilt on and playing as if he was on the playground in London. Then the whole group of number 6 Commando had formed up in column of threes on the landing craft, and with Lord Lovat and the piper leading them, they marched off the landing craft, through the water, onto the beach, up into the village, with the piper playing ahead of them. And I could hear the most impressive thing that you could ever imagine happening. Incredible. He had a lot of guts to march along playing that pipes. He raised the spirits of all of us on that beach that day. But if a piper could play, what the Germans do all day? Rubbish.
One of our squaddies was walking out forward with a machine gun, and he saw a bunch of Germans walking back with their hands behind their head, them taking prisoners, only about 7 or 8 of them. But he'd just lost his best friend, and he turned his machine gun on and machine gunned the lot. Now, that was anger and temper. He wouldn't have done it if he thought a bit about it and waited a bit longer, but in the heat of the moment, that sort of thing could happen. We were all victims of war.
In Weymouth, Dawn Gould was waiting for news from her American fiancé, Stuart.
I did hear from him a couple of times, and then I had a bunch of my own letters back, all tied together. It said, deceased, return to sender. And that's when I wrote to his sisters, and they said that he'd been killed, but they didn't know where. Not being a wife, an official next of kin, his sisters were his next of kin, so I didn't write a proper telegram or letter. I just had all the letters returned. And I had the souvenirs he'd given me from Sicily and North Africa, and I had a bundle of his letters, and that was all I had. And a couple of photos.
Here is the news. The end of the war in Europe was officially announced by Mr. Churchill at 3 o'clock this afternoon in a broadcast from 10 Downing Street.
We were so excited. London was awake again. And we kept bumping into each other. It's over, it's over, it's over. Oh, thank God it's over. Isn't it wonderful to be free? Isn't it wonderful to be able to go out? Everybody was saying, well, now our Jack won't get killed, now our John will be home, and everyone was saying, thank God they'll all soon be home. It was like about 20 carnival days all rolled into one.
I had a very, very large white ensign, which I brought home, and we flew that outside the house here, and that was really something. It was wonderful.
We'd been strung up for so long, we got so used to war, and we never thought it was going to end. It was the time when I was 21 till the time I was 27. Well, that's a lot of your life.
VE Day and VJ Day. They just didn't happen to me. This is the odd thing. I've learned more about them afterwards when I saw it on film. And it was the people who hadn't fought who celebrated. The ones who were fighting were still out there, or dead, or in hospital.
It was like a long horror story, and it was finished. There was no real joyfulness. There couldn't be. Too many people had been killed, and sons and husbands and friends and neighbours and that. I mean, it was such a... Well, I can't describe it, really. Such a horrifying thing from beginning to end. We were pleased we'd beaten Hitler, but on the other hand, life in this country was very grim, because the restrictions were tighter after the war than they'd been through the war. Well, actually, I had a nervous breakdown. A lot of people did.
I did not let myself linger too long on the bad things that had happened. I tried to think more of the future, what it would hold, and what we could do.
"60 years on, Churchill's words hold true. This was no war of chieftains or of princes. It was a war of peoples and of causes. A war of unknown warriors."
I don't criticize the young people for saying, oh, well, we've heard enough about it. How could you understand what we went through? How could you be sympathetic? Because you never went through it.
I feel very grateful that I was chosen to survive those traumatic events, and they have stood me in good stead all my life.
Life is full of tears. Life is like that, and you may have to cry, but there's no way of going around it. You can't turn your back on life.
It was 6 years. So what is 6 years? It goes very quickly. It makes you appreciate that time goes awfully quickly, and you should fill each unforgiving minute.
By and large, things could be better. In a perfect world, everything could be better. But the world is not perfect. We've been quite happy, really.